If you constantly lose your wrist in arm wrestling, you are doing something wrong. In this video, I will show you the best exercises you can do to fix the weakness in your wrist, and I will also share with you some important tips that will help you engage your wrist better on the arm wrestling table. Before getting into the exercises, I have to share the most important rule when you train your wrist. And this applies to every single wrist exercise. The rule is very simple. No matter which wrist exercise you do, you have to reach the point where your wrist is fully straight on every single repetition. This is the biggest mistake most of you make when training the wrist. You don't reach the position where your wrist is fully straight. If you only do this, don't wonder that you lose your wrist in every single match, because you are not training it in the position that you actually need in arm wrestling. In arm wrestling, you want to be strong here. This is where the match starts, and this is exactly the position you have to train in the gym as well. Of course, when you start to train your wrist properly, the weights will drop significantly, but then you have to choose. Do you want to do half reps with a big weight for Instagram likes, or do you want to train your wrist properly and to get good results in arm wrestling? For me, the answer is pretty obvious. Now let's get straight into the exercises, and the first one is wrist wrench curls on the flat bench. With almost every wrist wrench exercise you do, your wrist and fingers get trained almost equally. This is a great exercise to isolate the wrist almost entirely from your fingers. You will still feel some pressure on your fingers, but it won't really affect you anymore. Make sure your bench is high enough, otherwise this exercise will not work. Roll the wrist wrench up until your wrist is straight when you put your arm down. You can even start with your wrist slightly bent back to make sure you have enough range of motion. Another similar variation of this exercise is to make the weight come from the side. Many of you will prefer this one because it is much more comfortable. I had really great strength improvements with both exercises, and I highly recommend you start including them in your training. Next exercise is wrist curls with the end of a barbell. This is an exercise that you can do in any commercial gym, and if the gym doesn't have heavy dumbbells, this is a great choice. All you need to do is to fix the barbell on one end. The only disadvantage of this exercise is that the risk of injury is high if the barbell is too thick for your hands. Remember, you can always train with thick handles or bars to make the exercise harder for your wrist. But the most important part is to have good control over the weight and not to have any weird pains. If you have pain from a wrist exercise because the handle is too thick, stop doing it. Otherwise, sooner or later, you will injure yourself. Wrist injuries are hard to recover from and take a long time, so avoid dumb mistakes as much as possible. Exercise number 3 is my absolute favorite wrist exercise of all time. And after trying every single wrist exercise there is, it still remains my favorite. Dumbbell wrist curls in a 45-degree angle. For me personally, this exercise doesn't have any disadvantages. Of course, there are many similar variations of it. You can do it with your arms straight, with a barbell one-handed, or with both hands simultaneously. But none of them is as effective as the classic variation where you put your arm on the knee and you do your regular wrist curls. Many elite arm wrestlers do this exercise, especially the Georgians. And what a coincidence, because generally speaking, they have extremely strong wrists, regardless of the weight class. For me, if I had to pick only one single exercise for the wrist, this would be the one. By the way, all the equipment you see in this video is from Golden Grip. And with my code ALEX, you'll get 10% off on any purchase you make at goldengrip.com. The link is down below. Let's move on to cupping at a pulley. If you don't have any other equipment besides a table and a pulley, this is the right exercise for you. You can choose different handles for this exercise. You can do it with a power roller, with the Opti wrench, or if you want to make the exercise even harder, do it with a wrist wrench. When you do it with a wrist wrench, the weights will be much smaller because the wrist wrench attacks aggressively your wrist and fingers more than any other handle. This is a really great exercise, and it translates extremely well to the table because it simulates the position you are in during a real arm wrestling match. The big problem with it though is that it will train mainly your fingers and not your wrist, but you'll still have a good amount of pressure on your wrist. And the last exercise on the list is for those of you who do not have any equipment at all and train only with resistance bands. Attach the resistance band to a high position and simulate a handle by putting a fat grip on the resistance band. You can also do this exercise as a warm-up exercise if you are away at any tournament and you don't have anything else. If you want to get stronger, you will have to get some proper equipment at some point. But this one can still work as a good substitute. Now let me get into the tips on how you can engage your wrist better on the arm wrestling table. The first tip is very obvious, but there are still many arm wrestlers that don't apply it, and that is to actively focus on your wrist. This is an issue many new arm wrestlers have. They have to think about every move they do and forget to focus on the wrist. My tip is, first of all, to train with guys that will let you work and will also give you the positions you need. If you have someone that just wants to beat you up because you are the new guy, stop training with that guy. You will actively have to focus on your wrist, and you also have to communicate this to your sparring partners. Remember, the right framework when you learn something new is to start slowly and controlled, and then as time passes, you can increase the intensity because you will do everything intuitively. Tip number 2 is to never hold on to your opponent. Even some of the experienced arm wrestlers will make this mistake, where they try to hold on to the opponent. I experienced this with many of the guys I trained, where they start to get top rolled and instead of letting it go and slip, they hold on to the opponent and they lose the wrist completely. Remember, if you feel even the slightest sign that you hold on to the opponent, just let it go and go into the strap. This of course requires a lot of practice, and you will get better at realizing when to let go with time and experience. In the strap, if you lose your wrist again, you are either not strong enough or you are not well coordinated. But at least you know that you didn't hold on to the opponent. And tip number 3 is to work on your coordination. For some of you, it's not the wrist strength that is the limiting factor, but the right coordination on the table. I also experienced this in the past, where I thought that I am well coordinated and I don't need that much table tie anymore. But it was a huge mistake. Oftentimes, you are actually strong enough to beat your opponents, but you only lose to them because your coordination on the table is lacking. Make sure you include enough table tie to your training program where you can apply all the strengths that you train in the gym properly on the arm wrestling table. These were some exercises that will help you strengthen your wrist and a few tips that will make you a much more complete arm wrestler. If you have any questions, write it down in the comment section below and tell me which other arm wrestling related problems you have that you want me to cover in the next videos. With that being said, keep your eyes on this channel. Great stuff is coming.